Alrighty, welcome to the 160th edition of the MMA Circus here on BloodyOboe.com and live on YouTube. My name is Nick Baldwin. I'm your host as always, and joining me as our guest co-host, that just scared me, is Jed Meshew of MMAfighting.com. Jed, how's it going?
Oh, happy to be here. Is this 2 in a row? Did I do last week too?
I want to say you did.
I think so. I think this is 2 weeks in a row. So back to the good old days where I'm your de facto co-host.
Yeah, after we did Before the Battle last Thursday, I think we did, talking about UFC Atlantic City, which we saw this past Saturday. I remember when we said goodbye, it was basically, I was like, all right, see you in 3 weeks because no UFC. But I also added in right before we left, yeah, it'll probably be a lot sooner than that because I know Andrew Lawrence quite well, and knowing him, he wouldn't show up. And look what we have here. Yeah. Atlanta weather, all right. I know last week it was a little chilly, maybe chillier than you would like. Has it warmed up?
Yeah, the weather's still not like what you would expect for late April in Georgia, but I think we've mostly hit the turn, and now it's going to start. It's been rainy kind of the last few little days here, but it's supposed to get sunny again this weekend, and then I'm sure it'll be 80s and 90s and starting to feel good again. So that's exciting. How cold are you?
You know what? We're sitting very good right now. We are at a very warm 52 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow, just balmy up there, really.
I mean, for April in the evening at 7:38 p.m., where I am in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, it's nothing to complain about. It was a little cooler today. Yesterday, though, it was really warm. I don't know what 20 Celsius is, but we probably got right up into the high 60s, 68, I think we've gotten up to already. So it's getting nice in the peg. It's no longer the Arctic tundra. That'll come, October. But for now, it's nice outside.
Definitely seems like it's still the Arctic tundra, gotta say.
You're biased just because you have lived somewhere that it's
basically don't live in the frozen
out.
fucking north. You're correct.
No. I know. I mean, you've lived somewhere where it's hot out, basically 24/7, all 365, and so you don't know what it's like to live in the Arctic tundra like I do.
Yeah, but it's you. The thing is, I understand that I grew up in a place where like it stayed mostly 70 degrees year round at like the lowest. But I don't think that like, ooh, that's what winter weather is supposed to be like. I understand that I'm the anomaly here. Your weather is insane. So it's crazy that in late spring you're like, ooh, 52 is great.
Well, again, it is evening, so it was, the high today was 53.6.
See, that's fucking winter. Good move. You need to move.
Once I start covering MMA full time, I'll probably end up in Las Vegas and start complaining about the heat or something. I don't know.
Las Vegas I actually really like Vegas, but I don't like the weather all that much there. It's a fucking desert, and it feels like it.
Yeah, I remember International Fight Week. I wasn't there, of course, but just from what people were saying, I think that was one of Vegas's hottest stretches in a while, and that was early July last year. And I just remember hearing from some guys that went out for the card to cover it who don't live in Vegas. I mean, it was hard to survive, but don't live in Las Vegas if you don't like 40-degree weather. Celsius, that is.
Jesus, Celsius doesn't mean anything. It's made up.
That's well over 100 Fahrenheit.
No, yeah, it is. Wait, isn't it? And like the rule of thumb,
104.
The rule of thumb is like what? Double up and then add 32.
I don't know.
I think so.
It actually is close because
something close because it's like not. It's like 4/9. So it's like you like ballpark it with the double up and add 32.
Something I watched just actually literally an hour ago was Joe Rogan's most recent special on Netflix. It was not bad.
Yeah, there's a 0% chance I'm ever doing that.
Why?
I have to spend enough of my time listening to that dude talk just for the sake of this job. Like, I'm not going to watch him talk more on my free time.
Yeah, I mean, do you have to listen to Joe Rogan talk to complete your job? Do you?
Yeah, I have to listen to his podcast every week.
Do you?
I have to I skim through the non-MMA ones and I listen to the MMA podcast so I can, literally every MMA podcast has something that's like newsworthy or quotable or something that you can make an article out of. And a fair number of his non-MMA podcasts have something similar. He talks about a fighter or something, and because he is a person of note in the space, and he's one of the few, like he's honestly one of the biggest stars traffic wise in the UFC,
which is kind of crazy, but it
which is
also
fucking accurate.
it also sort of puts into perspective the fact that the UFC has no stars.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if I write up, earlier this week I did a morning report. Shit, was that today even? I don't even remember. Maybe it was today. Rogan talking about like how it's hard for the UFC to discipline McGregor. Yeah, I actually do think that was today's.
It was.
And like that's done good traffic. But if I did, somebody said that like whatever. Michelle Watterson basically said like something substantially similar 2 weeks ago, and I have no idea, but I'm fairly confident that didn't pull shit for numbers. Like Rogan's a fucking star in the sport, so I have to listen to his shit, and mostly it's stupid and dumb and makes me feel like an idiot for listening to him talk. So I was never watching his thing.
Joe Rogan would be a very interesting guy to sit down with for an hour and just talk to. Not even like a super formal interview, but just chat with him. And you can record it, but I think that'd be actually really interesting.
I think Joe Rogan is a good conversationalist, and so I wouldn't mind having a conversation with him. But there would be under the premise that I know that like he gives credence to a lot of really dumb shit, and that's just it. Like I don't have the patience or the inclination for a lot of the people that he gives a platform to on his show, on his podcast, which is one of the biggest podcasts in the world. Like, and I just don't have the fucking time for him to do that. I don't need to hear his thoughts on race relations because they're mostly bad or ill-formed. And like, I don't need to hear him talk about how Brendan Schaub saying something really racist it's not racist because I know Brendan, he's not racist. It's just that, part of our job is we have to get up here and we speak for 9 or 10 hours a week, like recorded. And so eventually you're going to say some shit and like, yeah, eventually you probably are going to say something that'll get you in trouble if you speak forever all the time. But one, what you say matters. And like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think if you recorded me every week for only 10 fucking hours a week, mind you, I don't think I'm going to randomly spout off some racist stuff. Like that's because that's not in me. And like, I don't need any of the shit I don't need Eddie Bravo's conspiracy theories in my life. I don't need him to talk to men's rights activists and talk about how the Nation of Islam or any of that shit. Like I don't fight. And maybe his stand-up might be fine. He's at least a well-versed dude and has like at one point in time I thought he was funny. I haven't really listened to his comedy in a while, so maybe he still is funny. But I watched News Radio. He was good on that. So maybe he's. I don't know. I just don't have the patience for that anymore.
And with that, people don't have the patience for us or the time for us to talk about Joe
Rogan.
What
a fucking segue.
So with that, let's segue right into this past Saturday's UFC Fight Night 128, right, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Kevin Lee.
You young podcasters, take note. That's how you fucking do it, right?
Kevin Lee picks up the most dominant and most impressive and biggest win of his young and very promising career. He defeats Edson Barboza by 5th round. Doctor stoppage TKO. You called it. I did not. I thought Edson Barboza would have his way with Lee on the feet, and I thought Edson Barboza would be able to defend the takedowns and keep this fight off the mat. He did exactly not that. Kevin Lee dominated on top. His mount looked superb, and really everything about Kevin Lee's game, every facet of it looked improved. It looked better. It looked good, and he looked like an elite lightweight fighter. And before we're going to talk about his performance quite a bit here, but I'll just say right off the bat, I underestimated Kevin Lee going into this fight, and I think he's a way better fighter. I knew he was good, but I think Kevin Lee is a great fighter, and I'm not sure I knew that.
Yeah, I didn't really understand going in. I feel like everybody did. Like I was supremely confident that Kevin Lee was going to beat the dog shit out of Edson Barboza. And you and I have talked at length on this show, on our other show. You know, I have a good deal of respect for Edson Barboza. Like I very likely in the top percentage of people, like as far as what the esteem I hold him into. And it was just baffling to me. Like I felt incredibly confident in the outcome of this fight and just didn't understand it. It feels like everybody got to where I'm at on Kevin Lee now, but I think everybody should have got to, like, we just saw him literally beat the shit out of arguably the best lightweight in the world for a round and a half. Like, Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee was not an anomaly. If they fought again, that fight is going to look the same. Only there's a higher likelihood that without the staph infection and the antibiotics, Kevin Lee just finishes Tony Ferguson. Like, that wasn't some type of random fucking fluke. Kevin Lee's really good because Tony Ferguson, like, everybody who watches the sport has respect for Tony Ferguson. You know, I think he's a top 5 lightweight. I don't think he's the best lightweight in the world, but I do think he's a top 5 lightweight. And Kevin Lee beat the fuck out of him. Like, 10-8'd him in the first round, was close to getting a stoppage. And like before the Tony Ferguson fight, I respected that Kevin Lee had a lot of tools and, you know, a lot of potential. But then after the Tony Ferguson fight, I was like, oh yeah, I don't know. To me, that fight was very clear. Like, yeah, if he didn't have staph and wasn't gassed up on antibiotics and it got exhausted 7 minutes into the fight, he just takes Tony Ferguson to the woodshed and beats him. And now this is like a new guy we need to worry about in this division. And now it seems that everybody's caught up to that idea. It didn't really make sense to me why that wasn't kind of the baseline beforehand, but we're all on the same page now. Guy's really good. I have no idea if he's the best lightweight in the world.
I do. I mean, I don't think he is, but I say that with less
being the best
confidence than
lightweight
I
in the
would
world
have
is
last
very
week.
it's a hard thing to say because, like, I think Khabib is probably the best lightweight in the world and has been for the last 4 years or so. But at the same time, lightweight is so much better of a division than any other division and so much deeper with so much more, like, the top 10 at lightweight. Not only are they all really good, they all have really different skill sets in a lot of ways. Like, they're good at different things, or they excel at different things, but they're still good at enough things that, you know, we talk about styles make fights, but realistically, on any like given night, it would not shock me for anybody in the top 10 to kind of fuck around and beat anybody else in the top 10. Even if on balance, they're probably, you know, Conor McGregor is probably going to beat up Eddie Alvarez more often than not when they fight, like probably a high percentage of the time. But it's totally viable that Eddie Alvarez could win a rematch there. I just think that there's so much parity in lightweight. The idea of picking, this guy's the best. Like, I think Khabib's the best, but I can see Conor McGregor knocking Khabib out. Similarly, I cannot possibly imagine a worse style matchup for Nate Diaz than Khabib Nurmagomedov. Like, I think Khabib beats the ever-living shit out of Nate. And, you know, Nate and Conor went hammer and tongs the second time. Nate has a win over him. Arguably, I personally think I scored a draw when they fought the second time on first thing, but on rewatch, I gave the fight to Conor. Like, you know, Conor and Nate are like right here. If they fought a third time, I might favor Nate. So, you know, it feels like in lightweight division, you can get a lot more of the rock, paper, scissors type of thing. And so saying like who's the best is hard to say, but I feel fairly confident in saying give Kevin Lee a couple of years and he's going to get the belt. Like, he's the youngest, the best youngest guy in the division. So feels like he, you know, whether or not he can take the belt from Khabib or whoever's going to end up having it by the time he fights for a title again. You know, I know he said it's Khabib time after the fight. It's not Khabib time. He needs at least one more win. But, you know, I can definitely see him getting that belt in the not too terribly distant future.
Before we talk about what is next for Kevin Lee, you know, in that lightweight title picture, or maybe I have an idea that doesn't totally include fighting for the lightweight belt anytime soon. We will get to that. I want to talk about Edson
Lightweight
Barboza.
Grand Prix?
No, actually not. Edson Barboza has taken 2 vicious back-to-back beatings to obviously the current reigning champion, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and now, of course, Kevin Lee. What do you do with Edson Barboza? I mean, his health is an issue. He should sit out for a long time. B, the thing is, we learned some from this fight. Like we learned that Kevin Lee is a very good fighter, at least I did. But as far as Edson Barboza's areas in which he isn't as dominant, although his takedown defense is typically good, maybe we overrated it. Maybe it was just on Kevin Lee's side. But at the end of the day, we learned that hey, you take Edson Barboza's space away from him, he's not a top 3 fighter in the lightweight
We've known
division.
that. We've known that taking the space away is the way you beat Edson Barboza. If you let him operate at range, there's nobody better. Like the Anthony Pettis fight should have been like Anthony Pettis' entire career was built around operating at range. If fighters consented to allow him to just kind of stand and do what he wanted to, he beat the shit out of people. And the people who beat him didn't. The exception to that rule being Edson Barboza, both of them wanted to stand at range, and Anthony Pettis had nothing for him because Edson Barboza is just a way better guy. If you consent to that fight, he's going to win that fight. But it just so happens that he's in, like I said, the best division in the sport, and the guys at the top of the division don't like their games are fairly well suited against his. Habib, Kevin Lee, both of those guys can pressure, can take your space, can put you on the mat, and then beat the ever-loving fuck out of you from there. I think if he fought a guy like Conor McGregor, I think he kills Conor McGregor. Even though Conor can pressure a little bit, he doesn't pressure well enough, and Barbosa's footwork has come along some that I think that's how that fight just ends up getting – he just gets shit kicked. Basically with Edson Barboza, I mean – anybody, I think, give him a little bit of a break. Again, we've talked about this. I'm less concerned about his mental health, not mental health, but like brain injury.
His well-being, his health.
Yeah, no, like he didn't get the lights turned off on him. He didn't look like oh no, like this is. I mean, he took shots definitely, and it's not good for his health in general, but I do think that he didn't it's not like he got bolted with one punch or whatever. He took a sustained beating for a while, but he was still
Which
in the
I
fight.
actually think might be worse than getting one punch KO'd in the first round.
Yeah, I think pros and cons, but the point here is that it's not like he gave up or cried uncle. Like he was still ready to fight in that 5th round. Too tough for his own good. Probably should have been stopped earlier. But
sometimes those types of beatings can be career-changing fights.
No, I'm less concerned about it. I don't know. Maybe it will be, but I am not. I think he shouldn't run around and do a 3-week turnaround like Frankie Edgar. But if he wants to come back in 6 months, I don't have a problem with it. And then we can find out. Like it's not going to be bad for him to take more time off, but. I don't know. Something about the way he got beat did not really feel like, okay, he needs to rest his brain. The question would be, I don't know who the fuck he would fight when he comes back.
Here's an option. This is quite contradictory to my whole idea of give Edson Barboza some time off so he can let his brain heal, but do Justin Gaethje. Both coming off back-to-back losses, both exciting. That would be one hell of a fight.
It's a good fight. I don't like it because just give them both a fucking softball. It won't happen because the UFC they just can't wrap their heads around it anymore, and I don't understand it. But I've been screaming this from the rooftop for forever now. Like, you weren't around then. There's a reason people like Wanderlei Silva. Like, there's a reason the Axe Murderer became this, like, cult phenom and a star, and then everybody gave a fuck about him. And the reason was not that he fought the best guy every time out and he always looked sensational. Because that's just not how fucking Pride operated. The reason is he did, like, occasionally he had big, awesome wins. He kneed Quentin Jackson through the fucking ropes at Pride 28. That shit was amazing. But and he won the middleweight Grand Prix. But also in between that, and in between his fighting Crow Cop and fighting fucking Mark Hunt, he also beat the shit out of Kazushi Sakuraba like 4 times, and he fucked up Shungo Oyama, and like it's Yuki Kondo, he stomped him out. Like it's, these are people who like aren't bad fighters in lots of ways, but they weren't his level of fighter. And frankly, they were showcase fights. Like, it's okay to let fighters have fucking showcase fights to hone their skills more, to build a fan base more, to, just have an easy night out, because that's how you make stars and build things. And they can't do that. I wouldn't be surprised if they did run Gaethje Barboza, and I'll watch it and it'll be super interesting. I think Barboza, I think it's a really interesting dynamic because Gaethje's going to take away the space that Barboza gives him, but he's going to eat a shitload of shots, and Barboza is, really good at beating the shit out of people who are going to not protect themselves super well.
Although I wouldn't mind seeing it when both guys have a bit of momentum back behind them.
Yeah, exactly. That fight's a better fight to make down the road than it is to make right now. Like, let them both fucking hustle some scrub that you pull off the street. Like, it does not matter. Sometimes fighters need tune-ups. Sometimes fighters need showcases, and they should totally do that.
What about a Gaethje versus someone like a James Vick?
I don't know. Well, I think James Vick is going to fight Paul Felder. So,
really,
Felder made the call out, and that fight makes sense in a lot of ways. So I would not be surprised if that's how that worked out.
Who just called up Paul Felder again?
Dan Hooker.
Yes, yeah.
Talking to him.
Yes,
literally talking to him.
No, I know. I wouldn't mind to see that fight. That was a really cool call up, by the way.
It was a cool call, and I wouldn't mind seeing it. I think Paul Felder shouldn't take it. Paul Felder's got a good win streak going. He finally is ranked, and if he's gonna make a career push, now is the time. And fighting Dan Hooker is not the way you make a career push. That sucks for Dan Hooker, who I understand.
They should do Felder versus Iaquinta. I would like to see that.
Felder Iaquinta or Felder Vick is fine. Like, either of those are totally fun fights.
Yeah.
But yeah, he should fight Felder should be fighting a ranked guy, and that sucks for Dan Hooker because he kind of also deserves that sort of step up. But maybe he can get Olivier Aubin-Mercier or something like that.
Yeah. As far as what is next for Kevin Lee, he is obviously very, very close to a lightweight title shot. Unfortunately, he did miss weight, but if you ask Yoel Romero, who missed weight against Luke Rockhold for that interim title fight, that really doesn't matter, and the UFC will just pretend him missing weight never happened. And so I don't think that hinders his chances of fighting for the title within the next year at all. As far as how close he is, it gets interesting because the lightweight title picture is a lot clearer than it was even last month, but it's still not super clear because Khabib won't.
It's actually in no way clearer than it was last month.
It's slightly clear just because.
It is clear in a fake sense of one guy. There is now one belt that one man holds. But
that man isn't Conor McGregor.
Yeah, but the question of who's the best lightweight between Khabib, Tony, and Conor, the three guys in that sort of vying circle, has in no way been answered. So we're still in the same exact fucking boat.
Sure. That's fine. Basically, we have Khabib sitting out till November or December. Perhaps a little earlier, but probably not. We have Tony Ferguson still hurt. We have Conor. We don't know what he's doing or where he is. And then we have Dustin Poirier, Eddie Alvarez, Kevin Lee, who all want to crack at someone ranked higher than them, or more specifically, Khabib Nurmagomedov, the lightweight champion. My thought, most people's thinking here, and I would assume you included, would be you do Kevin Lee versus either a Poirier or an Alvarez, number one contender fight, and then you let the other guy who doesn't get one of those fights give them someone else. Meanwhile, you do Tony Khabib or McGregor Khabib, and
the thing is that doesn't exactly work. Like, you can't give Kevin Lee
there
a
isn't
number
an
one
ideal
contender
situation
fight.
here. I don't think
you can't give Kevin Lee a number one contender fight. Like, there's no way to do it. Like, unless Conor McGregor is either not going to fight or is only going to fight Nate Diaz or Floyd Mayweather, which is possible. But frankly, at this point, I honestly think Khabib McGregor is the biggest fight the UFC can put on other than a Floyd Mayweather fight, whatever. And I think that's my guess at this point is we get McGregor Khabib in November. That's sort of my gut feeling on this, is that they need to strike while that iron's hot. It's the biggest fight they can do. That thing's going to pull 2 million pay-per-view buys. So they just need to snap that up. You can't give Kevin Lee a fucking title, like a title eliminator, because Tony Ferguson still hasn't lost in like 5 years or whatever. And you're not going to run back that fight when Tony Ferguson.
What about Ferguson versus Poirier and Kevin Lee versus Eddie Alvarez?
I mean, that's not a number one contender fight for him. Like you
No,
can do
no,
those
I
fights
know.
and those are
I know.
awesome, but if I'm Tony Ferguson, I'm probably not doing that. I mean, or at least I'm bitching really hard because I deserve a title shot, which is where I'm at. Like I
So
was the
then does
interim
Ferguson
champion.
wait for Conor Khabib happen or
Exactly. That if I'm Tony Ferguson, that's what I'm doing. I have no idea how long he's out though, is the other thing. Like I have no idea the recovery time on that LCL surgery, like that he had to have.
and then side
Um,
note, I still want to see Alvarez Poirier too.
yeah, like everyone wants to see that. That's like it's still a clusterfuck of a division. Kevin Lee's not getting it. Like what we know is Kevin Lee's not getting a title shot. They're not doing Kevin Lee versus Khabib Nurmagomedov because UFC doesn't want to light a bunch of money on fire. Um, so then it's who does he fight? Like he can fight Eddie Alvarez, and that's a good fight. I think that fight makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways because both of those guys think they deserve title shots, even though they clearly don't. And a win for either of them in that fight makes them at least more deserving of a title shot, even if they're still probably not going to get it. And then Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson fight for an actual title shot because I think Poirier and Ferguson should be further up the line towards title contention than Alvarez and Lee are. And in a better like if Habib wants to come back in November and Tony Ferguson's not going to be ready because of his surgery and Connor's not going to be ready because he's doing fuck whatever else, then Dustin Poirier just gets the shot. Like that's how that should break down. And that's fine. It's a little bit boring. Maybe one of the least satisfying in points, but that's a fine way to do it. And then you can have Kevin Lee, Eddie Alvarez fight, but they're still not in a title eliminator because you have Connor and Tony both hanging out, like hanging over everything. It's still a clusterfuck of a situation. There's no real resolution to anything. Personally, I think you do Kevin Lee, Eddie Alvarez. I just think that I would love to see Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier again, but then that leaves Tony Ferguson as the presumptive dance partner for Kevin Lee, and that doesn't make any sense since Tony Ferguson just tapped him out. And I hate doing a rematch like that quickly. Even if I would probably pick Kevin Lee in that fight, I still just don't like
No, you
it.
don't do Ferguson Lee too now.
Exactly. So I think you do Kevin Lee, Eddie Alvarez, or you can do Kevin Lee, Dustin Poirier. But I do think the Eddie Alvarez fight makes a little more sense than Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson. But frankly, if you're smart, if the UFC were really feeling themselves, what they do is here's how I would try and set this up. And I know that this would be a very complicated thing. I offer a giant big bag of money to Connor. Whatever he's asking for, I'll pay it. It's fine. Connor comes back and fights Khabib at the end of the year. So we do the December end of the year show. Khabib, Connor make a huge promotional push for the back 6 months of the year. Like after Ramadan finishes, we set that fight up, say, hey, this is what's going to happen. We do a big promo push, set that for the end of the year. In the meantime, we take everybody else, just all the rest of them, and we make a lightweight Grand Prix. Because it would be fucking awesome. And you get Tony Ferguson and Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier, Kevin Lee, Paul Felder, Ally Quinta, whoever else. You get 8 people, you make a tournament, and you run that tournament over the first part of the year. And then, or the first part of next year, or the end of this year, first part of next year, you do kind of your brackets and run it out. So then the winner of that is your next lightweight title contender to fight next summer against the winner of Khabib McGregor, because we know McGregor and Khabib they're not fighting super frequently anymore. So that's how I would do it, just because I think a lightweight Grand Prix would be fucking awesome with the current state of the UFC 155-pound division. You'd have to offer some people some money because Tony Ferguson's getting fucked in this scenario, but he already got fucked when they gave him a stupid interim title shot and then took his interim title away. It's all just dumb, so who cares? It's just great fighters fighting each other, and I don't really care how they do it. I'll be happy to watch any iteration of it. I'm fine with.
Okay, here is my idea, and it isn't pertaining to the lightweight division, but it is pertaining to Kevin Lee. And I think the time now is right for the UFC to build and launch and introduce the 165-pound division and build Kevin Lee around it. Build a division around Kevin Lee.
Why?
Because
we don't need more divisions. We have too many already.
But
we
Kevin Lee,
there is no. That's not a thing that's ever going to happen. It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. They're not going to make a 165-pound division. They're just not.
Kevin Lee's already 25 years old. arguably not in his prime, arguably not in his physical prime. And from here, he'll
Okay,
perhaps get stronger.
they're
And the
not
weight
going to
cut
make
will get tougher
165 division. Tell me why they would do that.
because they have a potential star in Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee,
Kevin Lee's not a star.
I
We have to have this
star.
argument right now because I had this discussion with somebody from MMA Fighting who will remain nameless the other day. I get it. Or at least I don't get it, but I understand it. Kevin Lee's just not a fucking star. And that's not to denigrate him because I actually like Kevin Lee mostly. Sometimes he says really dumb shit just trying to be a voice and be controversial or whatever. But like he doesn't drive traffic. He's not a star. I think he has a good personality and I think he's a hell of a fighter. And I told you, whatever. I said he was going to beat the shit out of Edson Barboza. I hope he does well. He's not a fucking star. And I don't like I think that we in the MMA media have such a backwards ass idea of what stardom is and like who the people are who are stars. Like Conor McGregor is a star.
There's one star in MMA.
Conor McGregor has the it factor. Ronda Rousey is a star. John Jones is a star. These aren't all on the same level. They're all stars. Michael Bisping is a star. Kevin Lee, he is. That's just a fact. Michael Bisping drives traffic. Like it's just like people care about Michael Bisping, but he's not like a huge star, and it took him a while to get there. Tyron Woodley, God bless him, is super successful and has his fingers in all these different sorts of pies in Hollywood and stuff, and somehow has a TMZ show. Let me tell you, he is not a star by the context of MMA traffic. Nobody gives a fuck about him. And the same kind of thing holds true for Kevin Lee. The many people in the MMA media keep positing that like Kevin Lee can be a star. I guess maybe he can be because anything can happen.
Well, that's what I'm trying to argue. No, Kevin Lee by
Chael
no means
didn't become a star until he was like 30. So theoretically in that world is what I'm saying he can be. But this is not give him a platform and a belt and he's going to be a star. Like people still don't give a fuck about him. And that's just like he's not. There's a difference between being MMA charismatic and being like actually charismatic. And that's just like Sean O'Malley's not actually charismatic. He's a fun fighter who smokes weed. And because he's young and has like a thing, we're trying to make him be a thing. And it's not. Hair. I don't like, yeah, like he's fun and has like an identifying feature about him and has an identifying personality quirk. And so like, ooh, Sean O'Malley can be a star. I'm like, no. And Kevin Lee's just not a star. And maybe he gets there eventually with the idea that you're going to build a useless weight division, which is the crux of this. 165 is dumb. Then, yeah, like that's why in God's name would I make a failed weight division or a stupid weight division to build around a guy who's probably not ever going to be anything more than like Tyron Woodley's his ceiling. Like that's.
I don't know if that's 100% fair to say because the thing is, I mean, again, he's 25 years old and 3 days ago he just won his biggest fight of his life.
Why are you trying to build? Answer the question. Why are you trying to build a division around a guy who's not a star?
Because you
don't build divisions around potential. That's dumb. You build divisions around a star.
Well, you can't do
when he becomes a star, then you can build a fucking division around him. But until then, why are you going to give him?
You can't build a division, a new one, because there's 2 stars in MMA right now. Conor McGregor and...
Yeah, you shouldn't be building a division anyway, is the point I'm making in general. There's no reason to build a 165-pound division because they're not going to get rid of 170, which is one of their marquee divisions. So then you have 155, 165, 170, and that's dumb. So it's just like that's
call it 162.
That's even stupider. We don't need a middle division between those two. I'm for a 165 division if we need if we get a 175 and a 185 and we gut 170. But since that is not going to happen, then we don't need a 165. It's a 10-pound or it's a 15-pound weight jump. It's okay.
There's a lot of fighters at welterweight that are small for the division. There's a lot of lightweights that are big.
Here's the thing. Who gives a fuck? And I mean that in the nice. No, you don't. I mean that in the nicest way. Because here's the thing that we all should have learned forever ago, and that everybody seems to have forgotten about. But is the underlying point of every one of the missed weights. Nobody actually gives a shit if you miss weight. We care in like some type of moral rectitude part of it. We're like, oh, well, you contracted to weigh 156 and instead you weigh 157. But none of us actually think that extra 1 pound was really a huge deal breaker or game changer in that fight. It's just kind of like a tisk. That's stupid. We don't care because at the core concept, it's not who is the best 105 or 155 pound fighter. The question we really want answered is who's the best fighter in a relatively similar weight range. Like, I just want to see cool, good people fight who are close enough together that it's not watching Demetrius Johnson fight Stipe Miocic. Like, that's it. And so we don't need more, no, unless you have a star who is specifically constrained by the 155-pound division. If Conor McGregor couldn't make 145 but was too small for 155, and so then that merits making a 150 division because he's a star, so then you want to give your star the best possible platform. But a dude who may or may not be a star who can totally make the 155-pound division, we don't need to build a fake division for.
I think giving Kevin Lee a belt wouldn't be the worst idea. The UFC has a lot of dumb ideas, and would it pay off right away? No, it wouldn't, because people don't know who Kevin Lee is. But give him a belt, give him the microphone, let him headline pay-per-views. People might start caring about
He can
Kevin.
do that anyway. You don't need a belt to do that shit. Conor McGregor doesn't have a belt, and he's been doing that shit forever. Like, it's fine. You do not need a belt to get a microphone and headline some shit. And more power to him. I am not here to tell you to shit on Kevin Lee's dreams. I want him to be the best star he can because it's better for the sport, which is better for me in general. But, we don't need, the idea that giving somebody a belt makes him a better draw or thing it's infantile and it's proven not true. No one gives a shit about Demetrius Johnson until relatively recently. It's a belt. The belt is purely an accessory. Push him. If you want to push Kevin Lee and put him on the fucking talk shows and have him do as many media circuits as you want and put him in main events and spotlight marquee matchups, I am for all of that because he at least has the potential to do something different than fucking Michael Chiesa or whoever. I don't know that he'll get there, but he at least has more of a potential for stardom than Dustin Poirier. But we don't need another belt. We need less fucking belts in this sport anyway.
All right, let's move away from that. Let's talk about Leslie Smith. Leslie Smith is, of course, the UFC women's bantamweight fighter who was supposed to fight Aspen Ladd on this past card in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Aspen Ladd missed weight. One of two fighters, of course, Kevin Lee being the other, to miss weight last Friday morning. And Leslie Smith, on the last fight of her deal, ended up not taking the fight. She planned on taking the fight, but she wanted to use the idea that, hey, I'm fighting an overweight fighter who unprofessionally did not, that's not a word, but being unprofessional, did not make the contracted weight. Let's try and use this as a way to extend my contract. Basically a bargaining method to bargain, basically, or get that deal. Because she knew that, hey, I am the person in charge of Project Spearhead. I am the interim president of Project Spearhead. There's a good chance the UFC wants nothing to do with me. So let's use this. Let's see what can happen. The UFC ended up basically telling her to screw off. They paid her to leave the UFC, to leave the organization. They paid her win bonus and her show money to not fight Aspen Ladd last Saturday. That doesn't happen. That's not a thing that happens. We never see the UFC pay out the win bonus and the show money for a fighter who decided not to fight someone who was overweight.
They literally did it on the card. Oka Sasaki didn't even get all of his show money.
And this is also 2 weeks after Dana White said the UFC is not rich enough to pay all the fighters in the bus attack because of Conor McGregor. They said they're not rich enough to give those fighters, including Chiesa, Pettis, etc., their win bonuses. So that's BS, if we're going to be completely honest about it. And Leslie Smith is no longer a UFC fighter. She believes, and rightfully so, that this was completely because of the Project Spearhead effort. She has initiated, she has launched. And I ultimately agree. I don't think there's any other explanation for it. The UFC wanted nothing to do with Leslie Smith, who hopes to unionize UFC fighters. Unfortunately for her, she's no longer a UFC fighter. So although she's still the head of Project Spearhead, she can't technically be part of the union, I guess, unless she goes to Bellator. We'll have to wait and see, of course. But the UFC, it's hard to say whether or not the UFC is concerned about Project Spearhead or think they have a chance, or else, or if it's literally just, hey, this fighter's trying to unionize. There's a lesser chance of them unionizing if she's not in the UFC. Let's say goodbye. What do you make of everything that happened when it comes to this?
If there's a gets it, I know we are not doing a gets it, doesn't get it. But I'm just going to go ahead and throw out the UFC doesn't get it. They fucked up super hard. And I think that they're probably just realizing that now. The whole decision kind of reeks of somebody who didn't go to their legal team at all beforehand and just tried to wipe some shit under the rug as quickly as possible. They knew coming in, they were having Leslie Smith fight a hot prospect. They were trying to send her out on a loss and then be done with her because this was the last fight in her contract. They don't have to renew nothing from it. If you saw today, big news is that Leslie Smith intends to sue the UFC for essentially wrongful termination. Basically, employers are not legally allowed to fire employees based on their desires, designs, intent, or vocal support of unions. That's like federal law. You cannot do that for obvious reasons because they can't intimidate. It's all to keep employers from intimidating employees, stuff like that, to keep unions as a viable option for the workforce. And so Leslie Smith is going to sue along those grounds, essentially, that, hey, what has functionally happened here is the UFC illegally terminated my contract with the intent of intimidating or for the purpose and with respect to the fact that I am, leading a union effort amongst their fighters. Brass tacks of this is, if you have any idea or any of our viewers are aware, UFC fighters are not employees by law. It's been ruled in some various suits. They're independent contractors. That hasn't really come under scrutiny in a while, again, since several different implementations occurred and went through the UFC system that are likely, or that at least would suggest heavily, that fighters are in fact employees and not independent contractors by the legal definition of those terms. And the difference there is complicated, but to shorthand it, employers versus independent contractors, like employers get to exercise more control. They get to dictate terms more specifically to employees, various things of that nature. And kind of the things we're going to specifically look at with regards. So like all of this is now going to come up in the suit because Leslie Smith is going to sue them on these grounds. And the UFC is going to say, well, we didn't fire her. We opted not to renew her contract, and those aren't the same thing. And we paid out her win bonus, blah, blah, blah. But she's not an employee. She's an independent contractor. And so this is now going to be like a legal case that's going to relitigate that point. But since the last time that was established, the UFC like imposed USADA restrictions. So drug testing and a 24/7 whereabouts requirement, like that's pretty invasive to personal privacy and personal choice in a lot of matters. And even more specifically, the Reebok deal. There's like specific legal wording or whatever that like employees have uniforms essentially, and previously UFC fighters wore fight gear, but they were allowed to pick their own sponsors, and so everybody's was different. Now everybody's basically like there is a uniform. There's functionally a UFC uniform in place, which is kind of like a big argument in favor of the idea that fighters under UFC contract are employees and not contractors. If that goes through, that's going to fundamentally change a shitload about how the UFC operates and be a big kind of snowball rolling downhill as far as unionization efforts, as far as more equitable treatment of fighters, as far as what fighters can expect and demand in their employment. It would be a really big thing. And the UFC is now opened this can of worms in an easy to absorb thing. Like it's very easy for Leslie Smith to bring this suit. Whereas instead, if they had said, okay, you're not fighting Aspen Ladd, that's fine. We'll pay your show money or whatever, and we'll rebook you for a fight later. Aspen Ladd's wrongful termination suit has a lot less sting to it. But realistically, they wanted to be done with her. Like you said, they want to wipe their hands clean of her. And if they don't pay her a win bonus, then credibly, there's the argument that she didn't ever get her final fight in her contract. And so then they would still owe her a fight. They just paid her money for doing her job. So by paying her the win bonus, the idea was, okay, we gave her the win bonus. That counts as her final fight. Now we can let her go. When in reality, they've opened a way bigger fucking can of worms because they're a really shitty run organization. So I'm excited. I hope Leslie Smith takes her to the fucking cleaners.
You are a lawyer. At least you have a degree in law. Do you think Leslie Smith has a good chance against the UFC in court?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, so reasonably, yes. I thought as soon as they implemented the uniform policy that, I thought it was dumb anyway that UFC fighters were ruled as private contractors in the first time around. But, once the functionally uniform came into play, I thought that kind of should have tipped the scales a lot further into employee status and the kind of USADA and just the totality of the circumstances. If it all hinges on if she can get a determination ruled in court that fighters are employees, because if so, it's pretty obvious that she was why she was fired. Like Zane Simon, I think, tweeted the other day, the UFC only has 19 women under contract in the 135-pound division. And so literally every woman that's fought in the UFC at that weight class that has a win is ranked. It's just they haven't supported the division at all, and they're gonna let go of one of their fighters who has some wins or whatever for no real reason. Literally the week before, Dana White said they don't have the money to pay people their win bonuses who don't fight, and then he goes and pays this. All of the circumstantial evidence seems super in her favor, assuming she can get it ruled that hey, yeah, we're employees, and so then my employer wrongfully terminated my contract in an effort to disincentivize my unionization efforts, in which case then she'll win money from the UFC because that's not a thing you can do, and it'll just be really fucking cool. My guess is that she's not going to settle because Leslie Smith does not seem like the person who's trying to get paid here. Seems like she's just trying to effectuate change. And so she's going to fucking go to the mat on this, which is what you need in a circumstance like this. Personally, it's hard for me to kind of, without really reading all of the court documents from the last time and whatever's going to come this time, it's hard for me to really, opine what will happen because in my head, it makes all the sense in the world that UFC fighters are employees and that they deserve the same rights and recognition as such, and that Leslie Smith got fucked here. But the UFC is going to spend many, many millions of dollars on a very well-paid legal team who will scour the ends of the earth to do what they can to slow this down, stop this, and counter-argue it. So, we're not going to get resolution anytime soon, certainly.
No.
But my belief is that UFC fighters are employees. And so at the end of the day, since I still, even though really a lifetime in the legal sphere has proven to me that the legal system does not work well, I still fundamentally sort of believe that the truth will out. And so Leslie Smith, by virtue of this and her efforts to unionize, will end up being one of the most important fighters in the history of the sport.
Which is kind of crazy, just
super
to think
weird
about it. But
one last thing on the Leslie Smith thing, and I have honestly nothing less to say on this. To the really dumb people who think that Leslie Smith was ducking Aspen Ladd or just trying to get paid for not fighting, this is a woman who jumped up 10 pounds to fight Chris Cyborg, which you, good keyboard warrior, would not do. So go fuck yourself. That's it.
There you go. I agree with that. So thumbs up. I'm very interested to see what goes from here. Where Leslie Smith goes, where the UFC goes, how it all shapes up, where Project
She's gonna
Spearhead
go to
goes.
Bellator.
Yeah, UFC and Bellator.
Well, I mean, I'm saying she's gonna go to Bellator
Yes.
because that's the best opportunity for her to continue, the Project Spearhead
Well, yeah,
drive.
because Bellator is included in Project Spearhead.
Exactly. So she's gonna go to Bellator.
I suspect so as well. A lot of her teammates seem to have good relationships with Bellator. Kerry Melendez is, of course, on the Bellator roster. So yeah, I suspect that is where she'll end up. Although she did tell me in an interview a few months ago, way before any of this happened, after the Aspen Ladd fight was booked, though, that after this one fight, like, because I obviously had realized that this was the last fight on her contract, and me putting two and two together, realized, hey, this is a fighter who's, fighting for fighters' rights, who is doing, the Project Spearhead thing. She has one fight left. She's probably not going to fight again. And she told me flat out that she wouldn't sign another UFC contract for less than $100,000 to show with no win bonus. And then had the UFC said no, she told me that she probably just would have gone back to school and stopped fighting. And so I think there's a chance she doesn't go to Bellator. Ultimately, I think she will. I am interested to see how that. I think that's actually a good thing because I know not to say she was on the fence about bringing on Bellator, but it was essentially Cage and Johnson that it had suggested that they did work with Bellator, or not work with Bellator, but introduce Bellator to Project Spearhead and include Bellator fighters. And so I think it'll give Project Spearhead a bit more diversity. I think that's good. Having a Bellator fighter as the president, and then having two UFC fighters to back her up, Iaquinta, and of course Cage and Johnson, the interim vice president, and then I guess Iaquinta is the secretary and treasurer. I wondered though, as far as the UFC's intent, I know they don't want anything to do with Leslie Smith simply because she's a burden to them. She's an annoyance to them. I wonder if they wanted to prove something to fighters that perhaps are on the fence about, should I sign that authorization card? Do you feel like the UFC is trying to scare off fighters from doing so by saying, hey, you support Project Spearhead? Look what we just did to its president.
Yeah. Maybe they're not trying to intimidate. I don't actually think they're trying to intimidate other fighters. I do think they're trying to send a message that fighters are expendable, and if Conor McGregor signed a Project Spearhead card, they're not going to fucking fire him. Or if any reasonable star signed one, they won't not renew their contract about it. But they are sending the message that, hey, this is not some shit we want going on here. And if you're expendable and if you're a random guy making 10-10 on the undercard and you come out repping Project Spearhead, you can find another place of employment. I think that's it's the most obvious and clear message you could ever send.
Let's talk about a fight that happened at UFC Atlantic City this past Saturday. It was on the prelims. It was the fourth fight of the night on FS1. We had Merab Dvalishvili taking on Ricky Simone in the bantamweight division. This was one of the craziest endings I think anybody's seen in the UFC. It was very wild. Dvalishvili was most likely up 2018. I believe that was the case on the scorecards, on the official scorecards by the three judges. At least two of them had him up 2018 going into the third round. Ricky Simone pulled off a very crazy comeback. He locked up a submission with about, I'm going to say 50 seconds, 40 to 50 seconds, maybe a minute left in the fifth round, or left in the third round, final round, and had Dvalishvili in a world of trouble. I don't know how Dvalishvili did not appear to go out when we were watching live. He certainly didn't tap out, although he started kicking. And at first I thought he was tapping out with his legs for whatever reason, but clearly that wasn't the case. I still don't totally understand that. It might have just been some involuntary reaction. I don't know.
I assumed he was kicking as a
try and get, maybe
saying, hey, look, I'm not unconscious.
Perhaps.
That is how I interpreted the kicking, is that it's the same as a thumbs up.
Right.
But his arms are tied up trying to, not get choked unconscious.
But anyways, the final bell sounded, and Merab Dvalishvili, although he looked still very they almost fading in and out of consciousness, almost like halfway there, halfway not there. He survived. At the very end of the fight, he was not unconscious. Sure, he laid down, or he stayed
That's
laying
up for
down
debate. Several people seem to think he was.
at the very end of the fight when Simone
Yeah,
let go of the submission.
yeah,
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell.
it is.
Nonetheless, Ricky Simone still got the win, and again, this is something that's up for debate. I mean, should they have gone to the scorecards because the fight was not called before the final horn, or because Dvalishvili was arguably unconscious? Should they call it a technical submission? Of course, it should never have been a TKO. Both Mark Goddard and John McCarthy said that, but
Yeah.
just as far as the actual result, but should it have been a stoppage win, technical submission to be specific for Ricky Simone, which it was, or should it have gone to the scorecards? I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to come up with a very clear answer here. I'm on the edge of you go to the judges, but then when you have two of the best referees, or I guess in McCarthy's case, former referees, both saying it should have been what happened, other than the fact it was a TKO. It's hard to argue with them. I'm not a referee; they know more than me. But from me watching on TV, I don't. Dvalishvili was not unconscious at the end of the bell, or at the end of the fight. The referee did not cause a stop to the fight before the final bell. Therefore, it should have gone to the scorecards. He survived. And we see in other fights, fighters go in and out of conscious. I mean, if they get slammed, we've seen guys go unconscious and then they get hit a couple times, they wake up. Fights aren't called. This is a tough situation, though. I don't think there's like an easy way to come up with an answer. Nonetheless, what do you think? Did they get it right? Should Ricky Simone be your winner here, or did Dvalishvili really get screwed?
So there's a lot to unpack here. Obviously, it's even difficult for your explanation, which is pretty good, and pretty linear to kind of get all the moving parts here. Short answer, I think they got it right. I think the end result is correct. The process to get there was wrong. So if they had to show their work like a math problem, I think they got it. I think that's suboptimal. I guess first point I'll make is, so the idea that it should go to the scorecards is right and wrong, in my opinion. The rule is written as such that if the dude's choked unconscious at the bell, then that still counts as a technical submission or whatever. Like if he was unconscious, if you get knocked unconscious at the 5-minute mark of round 3, or like the Thiago the Lyoto Machida Thiago Santos fight. Remember that fight?
Thiago Santos. No, I don't. That's not a fight that's happened.
Not Thiago Santos. Fucking Christ. What is
Thiago Silva?
Yeah, Thiago Silva. There you go. Thiago Silva. Yeah. You remember that fight?
No.
Okay. Well, at the end of the first round, literally at the bell of the first round's buzzer, Lyoto Machida ices him, like just knocks him on the fuck conscious, and the fight's rule, like that's the end of the fight because he's knocked unconscious. He doesn't get the minute to recover, and then if he's awake at the end of the minute and ready to go again, he gets to fight again. No, he was knocked unconscious. He's out. Those same kind of rules apply per the rule book for even the last round. So if he was unconscious, then a tech sub at 5 minutes of round 3 is fine. I think that, I will say that it's very hard to feel, 100% confident in any of the things that happened as far as the state of the fighter during this bout. But my interpretation is also, I don't think he was unconscious at the end of it. It just didn't look like he ever really crossed that threshold to me. He was knocking on the door, and maybe another 10 seconds he might have been there. Personally, it looked to me like he had done enough to survive to see the final bell in that regard. But I would not bet my life that he didn't go unconscious during that choke. Like if there was some way to retroactively prove it, I wouldn't feel confident betting on it. Conversely, I am, obviously since I think he wasn't, I am definitely not confident he was unconscious at the end of the fight and that the submission, should be ruled a tech sub in that regard. So to me, in my head, it makes more sense where there's a gray area and we're unclear, it makes more sense to me that you would err on the side of caution. And by that, I mean you err on the side of giving Dvalishvili the scorecards, like going to the cards because, it just morally, it feels worse to me that Dvalishvili would get an unnecessary sub loss if he really didn't get choked out than it does that Simon maybe loses on the cards because realistically, he had 2 rounds to do more than what he did. Like for 10 minutes, he wasn't winning, and that's on him. He could have done some more things during those 10 minutes. But all of that being said, one of the things you didn't mention, I actually do think Dvalishvili was unconscious on the slam. I think he knocked himself out taking Simon down. You can go rewatch the video. His legs go limp, and the reason Simon gets that guillotine and rolls into mount, like it looks super, like it just looks like Dvalishvili, his legs go limp, like he hit his head on the canvas, gets stunned, his legs go limp, and then Simon rolls him over and is in a mounted guillotine like instantly without any real pushback or defense from Dvalishvili. So to me, I actually do think that he was knocked unconscious from that and then woke up in the middle of the guillotine. And so, also by that respect, it does feel like maybe Simon should have won in that regard. But kind of to wrap all my thoughts up here, in my perfect world, what would have happened here is because they missed the possible slam KO, and I don't think that it is conclusive that he was out at the end of the timer. To me, I would have liked it to go to the scorecards, and then obviously it's a whole different kettle of fish. But in my mind, then Simon still wins on the cards. He was down 2 rounds to none, but in the Jed Meshew way of scoring fights, I think it's a 10-7 round. Like the way I score fights is very different than the rules or whatever, but the rules are stupid and score fights in a very dumb, useless manner. But I honestly, like, if a fighter is almost out, like literally a second away from being finished, I just think just mark that at 10-7. It's 10-7 round. Like, he almost died in there. So, yeah, that's a 10-7. And by all virtue of the circumstances, Dvalishvili was almost unconscious or was unconscious. Like, I think you give it a 10-7. And then Simon wins on the cards, 1 round to 2, but a 10-7 round. So that's how, in my mind, it should play out. If all parts are doing all of their jobs correctly, the fight should go to the scorecards, and then Simon should win. What is that score even? So 28-27 should win a 28-27 decision. But the end of the day, it's hard to get too mad because I do think the right guy won. I think just reasonably, none of the arguments except for out of the Dvalishvili camp are, well, the right guy got screwed. Like, everybody thinks Simon deserves the win here because even if he didn't quite get it, he got it, So it's tough to be mad about, but I do think it's an interesting thought experiment, certainly.
Do you think Merab Dvalishvili has a chance if he does choose to fight this?
No, he's appealing and he has no chance.
Can you say that again?
He is appealing. He said so today. He has no chance.
Why?
Because by the book, the decision was accurate. According to the rule book, because again, referees do not need you to submit to stop the fight. They don't. Like, it's really it is a ref discretion thing, And this isn't who is that stocky dude who's like a shitty boxer who got fake tapped? Fuck. You would say his name. He's the guy who got tapped by the guillotine that wasn't even locked up. Oh my god, this is gonna drive me insane. I can picture his fucking face.
This happened in the UFC?
Yeah, like 3 years ago.
Drew Dober?
Yeah, Drew Dober. There you go. Perfect. Yeah, Drew Dober got to win his thing because it was a clear, enormous fuck up. Like, there wasn't even a choke in when the ref ruled it a submission. The But this one, there's clearly a choke in, and it's very debatable what happened. So the rule on, like, the call on the field is going to stand. And they didn't misinterpret the rules. Like, it is, like I said at the beginning of this, that's the rule. If you get submitted at the 5-minute mark, that's a sub. It's a TKO sub, or it's not TKO, it's a tech sub. And so by the book, I think this is fine, and he can appeal it and spend whatever money he wants to do that, but he's not going to get anywhere, and, it's fine.
I think one reason he might appeal, obviously, I mean, having a win bonus would be nice, but ultimately he's 0-2 in the UFC now, and as a guy who came in off a big win over Rafael Stotts, he was almost undefeated, just one loss on his record. A bit of a promising fighter. 0-2 early on is not a great look, and being able to turn that into 1-1. And keep in mind, his first fight was a bit of a controversial.
Would it be 1-1? If the fight gets overturned, it's not a 1-1. It's going to be a no contest.
Oh, I guess so. Well,
no, they can't give him a win. It never went to the judges' scorecards, and I mean, even if they looked at the judges' scorecards, which I don't know if we even have them, they would just have to rule it a no contest. But like when Chiesa appealed his Kevin Lee loss, like honestly, you're dealing with a pretty similar circumstance. I actually think Chiesa has a better argument here than Dvalishvili does.
Maybe, yeah.
Because Chiesa
appeals are very tough in MMA.
Not unconscious. Nothing came of that. So
appeals are very tough in MMA. I mean,
yeah, it has to be
a big screw up from the ref for an appeal to work, and that's kind of unfortunate because I think Dvalishvili does have a good case here, but ultimately, it's hard to say that it'll go anywhere. Okay, last order of business before we do say goodbye to our very few but very, the viewers. We appreciate you, the appreciated viewers. Let's talk about this weekend's Bellator 198 card. We're only going to talk about the main event, Fedor Emelianenko versus Fedor-Mir in the first round of the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix tournament. Firstly, do you care about this fight? I'll give you my thoughts real quick. I'm kind of on the fence. I mean, this is a fight where it's like, okay, if someone says, let's hang out on Saturday night, I'm probably not staying home to watch Bellator. I always enjoy watching Fedor. So. Say that one more time.
I'm working it, so I'm watching it.
Yeah.
That's my beat. I work every Bellator for us.
I know you do.
I am the Bellator guy.
You are. I enjoy watching Fedor fight, even though he's way past his prime and old, simply because I didn't watch Fedor fight when he was in his prime, which sucks a lot as an MMA fan nowadays. But I guess I'll enjoy his fights while I can until he is completely done and not going to fight again and, whatever else. On the other hand, Fedor-Mir hasn't fought in a long time. His last fight was a Todd Duffy fight, right?
I have no idea, honestly.
You know what? Actually, I don't know. It wasn't. He fought someone else since then. Andrei Arlovsky. I know he fought since then.
That's not right.
Yes, it is, I think.
Is it? That can't be right. Mark Hunt was his last one.
Arlovsky was after the Todd Duffy fight, though. Yes. So 2016 of March 2016 was his last fight. Do I care about Fedor-Mir? Not really. This is going to be kind of an interesting fight, and that's why I'm sort of interested in it. But these are two guys past their primes. I like the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix. I dig it. It's a good idea. People are talking about it when Bellator ratings are at an all-time low, but this one fight doesn't do tons for me. Do you care?
I care sort of just because it's part of the Grand Prix, and I love a Grand Prix, and I think tournaments, that's one of the things the UFC just hasn't gotten right is that tournaments are kind of the backbone of this sport and have always, that's how the sport started. It's always kind of the best, most interesting, exciting part of the sport, and the UFC's really gotten away from that.
Tournaments are the backbone of any sport, basically.
Yes and no. In many ways, yes. But particularly this sport was built on one-night tournaments. And then it got away from that. And so, Grand Prix are kind of the best of one-night tournaments aren't really a sustainable thing. They have way too many issues intrinsically with them. Grand Prix are very doable, and the UFC doesn't really do them. seriously, like think like outside of the tough tournaments or whatever, the last Grand Prix they did was the flyweight belt Grand Prix, and that was just like the 4-fight tournament between Benavidez, Johnson, McCall, and shit. No, whatever. Juicy. It's fine. But yeah, so I like the tournament. I like the Grand Prix. I think that's fun. I like kind of the mix up of the Grand Prix too. I'm less interested in this fight and like it's specific, like this fight specifically, just because you're getting two fighters well past their prime, and it kind of hurts my feelings to watch Fedor fight because he's the best heavyweight of all time. Now, people are like, "Oh, you're Fedor stan," and yeah, I am. That's fine. The reality is that like when you're arguing about who are the greatest and who are the best, context matters. And if Prime Fedor fought Prime Stipe probably beats him. Like I'm just going to be honest. But I also think that Prime Kane beats Prime Stipe. So like, there's that too. But you're not talking about like who wins in their prime because you can't really compare eras. You are just sort of talking about like how good they were, how dominant they were during their time. And I was there for Fedor. I watched Fedor be the best heavyweight in the world for a decade. And the awe and the reverence and the way people talked about Fedor is just not something that Stipe has. And I think that matters. Like, if you're the baddest man alive, which arguably Stipe is, even though John Jones probably beats up Stipe if they fight, and I'm going to pick Daniel Cormier to beat him later. I think that title, part of that comes with having a mystique. And yeah, lunch pail dude goes out, just knocks people out, and that's awesome. Nothing but respect for Stipe. But I think if you watch both of them fight, it's hard for me to believe, like in their primes, it's hard for me to believe that like you actually think Stipe is the greatest heavyweight of all time. You might think he's the best, and that if you put them together, he would beat up Fedor. Sure, I agree, but that's not the point here. Stipe would need to defend the title for another like 4 years, and then maybe he kind of enters that realm. So it's a depressing thing for me to watch the greatest heavyweight of all time, wallow in ignominy now and have trouble with Fabio fucking Maldonado, who he should have lost to, and things like that, and get knocked out by Matt Mitrione. As far as the fight goes, who the fuck knows? They're both old and shot. My guess is Frank Mir probably wins it, but maybe Fedor just throws a big right hand and knocks Frank out. Who knows? So we'll see. Isn't Dylan Dennis making his debut this weekend too?
Yeah, but I don't care.
Yeah, talk about somebody else who thinks they're a star and sucks balls. Dylan Dennis. Yeah, that's awful. But yeah, so
I'm picking Fedor. Just putting it out there. I don't know how. I mean,
I'll probably pick him just because I want him to win, but in my head it makes sense that Frank Mir is less shot than he is.
Hey, it's possible, but anything's possible when it comes to the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix tournament. So, yeah, I'm going out on a bit of a win.
Not anything possible. Ryan Bader is going to win the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix tournament.
And when Frank Mir, when Chael Sonnen knocks out Ryan Bader to become the Bellator Heavyweight Champion, I'll send you a direct message on Twitter and tell you who's right.
I'll eat my fucking shoe.
That really would be hilarious, though. But
yeah, hey, I would think it'd be incredible. I'll eat my shoe if it happens.
Bellator is crazy, but probably not that crazy. But nonetheless, I think that's it. We talked about UFC Atlantic City. We didn't get to every fight. We got to very few fights. Shout out to Frankie Edgar getting back into winning column against Cub Swanson. All the other fights. So overall, it was a good card. Leslie Smith, of course, no longer UFC fighter, still chugging away at the Project Spearhead effort. Good for you. And then the weird finish to Dvalishvili Simone, and then the craziness that is Fedor Emelianenko versus Frank Mir. I think we talked about it all.
Yeah, sure. I can't think of anything else that I care about.
There we go. Episode 160 of the MMA Circus in the books. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. Go give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already down there. I would appreciate it. And after we are done in just a few moments, go click down on the MMA Circus button down there and give us a subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. I would really, really appreciate that. If you have any feedback for the show, good or bad, leave a message down in the comment section down below, and I will reply to you ASAP if need be. Jed, let the people know where they can find you. I'm sure they're already following you, and I'm sure they read your work every single morning, weekday morning, that is. But if they don't, if they're a newcomer to the Jed Meshew bandwagon, let them know where they can find you.
My work's on MMAfighting.com, the premier site for all your mixed martial arts news and coverage. Award-winning MMAfighting.com. So yeah, go check that out. It's important, good stuff. Every day I've got something going up. Otherwise, follow me on Twitter at Jed K. Meshew.
Notice how the World MMA Awards seem to not be happening this year. I'm sure they're just going to give the Journalism of the Year award to Bloody Elbow. They're not even going to have a competition for it.
Probably not. We're probably going to continue to win all the awards.
Probably.
Whether that's right or not, I'm willing to debate, but we're probably going to win.
You guys can find me on the Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find all of my writing on the best MMA website in the world. Maybe not the #1 premier, but damn close, and definitely the best, bloodyelbow.com. Go check it out. I will have some interview pieces up sometime this week, I think. Today, I interviewed Louis Smolka, former UFC flyweight contender who picked up his first win since July 2016 this past Saturday down in California. We talked about that win, getting back into the winning column, and eventually, hopefully, finding his way back to the UFC flyweight roster. Tomorrow, I am talking to Rob Font, who takes on Rafael Sunsao at UFC 226 in July. I'm also speaking with this past weekend's big winner, Kevin the Motown Phenom Lee. Other than that, that is pretty much what I got going on. Thank you all for watching. We really appreciate it. You can find the MMA Circus on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Google Play, SoundCloud, here on YouTube, bloodyelbow.com, TuneIn, Player FM, Pocket Cast, Podcast Addict, and pretty much anywhere else you can listen or watch a podcast. YouTube, I guess, is the only way you can find us and in video, but everywhere else will be audio. Go subscribe, go save the podcast, go favorite it, go like us, go follow it, do everything. We really would appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. For Jed Meshew, I'm Nick Baldwin, and we're out.